I'd like to introduce a good friend of mine and a sober member of Alcoholics Anonymous in good standing, Joshua B. I gotta get this.
Morning, everybody. My name's Jesh, and I'm an alcoholic. My sobriety date is 12/17/2018. I have a home group with whom I'm of service to, and I have a sponsor with whom I meet regularly. I say these things because it's important for me to be able to remember, one, where I came from, two, that I belong here, and three, that I'm accountable to somebody. Thank you for having me up here, Rich. I feel like I need to say some nice things about you now. You know, in AA they say that normally us people would not mix, right? And Rich and I have some very differing opinions, but I will tell you that I love him dearly, and I know he would show up for me if I fucking called him. And that's what this shit's about, right? So I was born into an awesome, amazing family, loving. Both of my parents were ministers growing up, and at about the age of 5, we fell on some hard times, moved into a homeless shelter, and within that homeless shelter, I was sexually molested. And I say these things not to say maybe that's why I'm an alcoholic, but I don't want to rob somebody the opportunity to relate with me. And it's taken me a long time for me to be able to stand up here and tell you these things. And so I'll skip ahead a little bit. You know, I always felt like I was a part of, you know, initially when I was younger. I made lots of good friends. I made lots of friends that were older. I was a little more grown up for my age. And that, you know, that continued for a number of years. And then I think it was about my 12th birthday party, and I was having all of my best friends in the world over, and we were watching, I don't know if y'all remember the sci-fi movie Tremors, and we were watching that movie Tremors, but my buddy, his dad had just closed a bar, and so they had a garage full of booze, and I had already smoked a little weed at this point, and this garage full of booze was just readily available to us down the street. And so we took some Gatorade bottles over there and we filled them up to the brim with alcohol. And like Ben was talking about last night, I found an answer to something that I didn't even know I had. I immediately felt that you all looked at me differently. I felt more a part of than I was before, even surrounded by the best friends in the entire world. And and I'm sure after, you know, y'all paying bills for a number of years, we didn't have much cares when we were 12. But I felt more a part of. And so I immediately started chasing that. I quickly was smoking weed, drinking every single day. I began to interject my will into my parents' lives, into how they wanted to raise me. I went to good preparatory schools. I was at this place called Northland Preparatory Academy, and I told my mom if she continued to drop me off there where nobody was partying, I wouldn't continue to go to school. So halfway through my freshman year, I moved to a different high school in Flagstaff, and I didn't immediately gravitate towards the people that were intellects or popular or good at sports. I immediately gravitated towards the people that were sitting on the outside, right? on the edge, and they were 1 foot in, 1 foot out. And over the course of that second semester at Sanawa, I had 142 absences. Within that first 6 months I was at Sanawa, I started taking ecstasy and LSD and mushrooms. And just to tell you with candor, I have a little bit of drugs in my story. Big surprise. So as soon as that happened, for some reason, consequences started coming a lot more rapidly. There was the summer between my freshman and my sophomore year, and I got a possession and paraphernalia charge for smoking some weed, and I didn't think it a big deal at the time, but I do recall the officer bringing me home to my parents' house, and I asked the officer before he let me in to wake my dad up if he could take the cuffs off, and he told me no. And so I had to stumble into my parents' house and wake my dad up. Mind you, my dad's a big guy and he sleeps naked. And so this cop follows me into my parents' room, and I had to, doing the shackle shuffle, had to turn around and wake my dad up. My naked dad rose out of bed, and this is one of the first times that that pitiful, incomprehensible demoralization started to appear in my life, and it sure as hell wouldn't be the last. And so they proceeded to drug test me for 9 months. I failed eight out of those 9 drug tests, and at a God willing, I guess, I don't know. For a brief stint, I had a little bit of sobriety because I was trying to get ungrounded, right? And I was letting these alcoholic tendencies that I carried with me affect the way I lived, right? Before I even started drinking, I would steal my grandma's cigarettes and I'd smoke them until I puked, and then I'd smoke some more. And while I was grounded, my parents would turn off the Wi-Fi at night, and I'd sneak into their room and I'd turn that Wi-Fi back on, and I would play video games until 4 o'clock in the morning, and I couldn't just leave it alone. It helped me to escape who I felt like I was, and so I would do that. I would play video games till ungodly hours of the night, and about this time, I turned 15 years old, and I had about a month sober at the time, just dry, right? Because I wanted to get ungrounded. And one of my closest friends in the world ended up committing a murder, and I was called onto grand jury stand as a final rebuttal witness for a grand jury murder trial. And I haven't shared about that story except for recently, because I allowed my character defects from growing up and selling dope and living in the street life to make me afraid of how you all would look at me for being on a jury stand. I didn't want to be the snitch. I didn't want to be, and so it wasn't until 5 years sober where I got the guts to share about being on this murder trial, because I know y'all don't care anymore. And so at the age of 16, I was told whether I either play soccer or get a job, right? And so if I got a job, I could afford the booze that I wanted to drink, right? And so I quickly got a job, and that put me in contact with older people who could buy me alcohol, and I enjoyed that, right? I started to feel a part of again, and that's really what I was searching for. Whenever I would drink or get loaded, I wanted to be a part of. And so I was working at this place called Ruby Tuesday, and I loved it, man. I made lots of older friends. I drank a lot, and I started staying up until 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning every night, drinking, doing drugs, and I failed four classes in the morning because sleeping through my first 2 classes was way more important to me than getting a good education, right? Sleeping through my first 2 classes so I could stay up all night getting drunk. And so this continued on for a number of years. My senior year in high school, I got voted life of the party, right? And I thought that was a big fucking deal. I was like stoked. We had a picture in the yearbook of me shooting a beer pong ball, and and when I honestly look back and reflect on that, it really meant that my friends were gonna beat up your friends. We were gonna steal your keg. We were going to take your mom and dad's piggy bank from the house you allowed us to throw a party at, and I would cause havoc in other people's lives. And later on, I'd find out that I'd have some amends to do for those types of behaviors. Once I graduated high school, I had of course been kicked out and sent on my own for a while because my parents couldn't put up with me. I was yet again invoking my will over my parents, and I didn't see that they had good intentions for me because I am selfish and self-centered. As I was driving out here yesterday, I was so worried about having to share this morning because I really fucking care about what the hell you guys think about me. And so it's still present in my life, right? I moved out at 18, and at the time I had a girlfriend that we had been together for a number of years, and I thought she was the love of my life, right? And I was living in this house, and I have this uncanny ability. I don't know if any of you other alcoholics have it, but when you're at a house party and you see some other people sneak off to another room, you kind of know what they're doing over there, and it's like this sixth sense that they're doing something fun and you want to join in on it. And I saw that happen, right? And I have this spidey sense that there's some extracurriculars going down back there. And so I followed these folks in this room, and I sat down next to them, and they were passing around something called black tar heroin. And so I manipulated my way into trying heroin for the first time. I told them that it wasn't my first time. I was invoking my will yet again, and I watched them do it a couple times, and I jumped right in. That I had arrived moment when Bill talks about it, and when he's making money and he's finally found it, right? I had finally found where I was able to quiet this mind that I had. I had finally found that ease and comfort. And so I made that decision right then and there that I would chase that into the gates of insanity or death. I didn't give a shit who I ran over on my way to get there. And so I was quickly sneaking out of the bed that I shared with this woman that I loved at the time, and coming home at 4 o'clock in the morning to her crying, and so I was cheating on this person that I thought I loved at the time with the drug that I also thought I loved. And I may not have been cheating on her with another woman, but I was cheating on her with the drug of my choice. And so I quickly realized that, like, I can't do that. so again, I found out that it was the drug's fault, not a Jesh fault, right? Not a me problem. And so I quickly pulled back and I just started getting blackout drunk and smoking crack because that would solve my problems. And I considered that sober, right? I would get blackout drunk, smoke crack, and then take Xanax in the day to get through work. And I was sober at the time, and I was doing great. I let that go on for about 11 months, and then I had this claw, just clawing at me, and I eventually went back to my drug of choice, and I lost the girl, I lost my place to live, I narrowly lost my job, and I quickly started reeling, and I realized that it's the drug again. So back to the previous, I decided I would just drink and do maybe a little bit of cocaine on Friday nights for a while, and so that's what I chose to do. I was a bartender at Chili's at the time. Shout out Chili's, getting drunk at the bar at Chili's. Thanks, Ben. I was a bartender at Chili's at the time, and I was probably making, $250, $300 a night, and downtown just happened to be on my way home, and it just worked out like that. And so whether I had friends that were out drinking that night or not, it didn't really matter because the bartenders all knew me downtown. And so I would go and search for that camaraderie, right? I was seeking things outside of myself to help me feel fucking good because I didn't like who I was inside. And so, many a nights I would leave work with $300 and come home with not a nickel. And, I recall one time, waking up, and at the time I drove a 1990 Buick Century. I don't know if you know, that thing had more cigarette lighters in the car than it had seats. And that thing was badass. It was a $500 vehicle that would take me anywhere. And I woke up and I had no keys to my vehicle, and I was knelt down in front of my bed with my face down on the bed with a bottle of Smirnoff in my right hand and a 2 liter of Coke in the other, both of the caps off, still liquid in both. And I searched madly for those keys, and I found my Buick Century parked in my neighbor's yard on top of a bush running. And I that is how I like to drink, and that is how I like to get loaded. I like to drink until there's nothing left or I can't fucking stand anymore. And I'm sure a couple of you may be able to relate to that. And so I was seeing a couple girls at this place I work, Chili's, and one of them was like, "You're so smart, maybe you should get an education." And the other one was like, "I can drink a fifth of Jameson and a 30 rack." And I was like, that's the girl for me. And so like a good alcoholic couple, we started dating in Lake Havasu on spring break on a serious multi-day bender. And our relationship continued to be like that, right? And so I had been what I thought was sober, just getting drunk for a while, and I introduced this girl to heroin. And so like I had learned early on in my drinking and using career that I couldn't afford to use as much drugs as I wanted unless I sold the drugs that I wanted to use. And so that's what I proceeded to do. Her and I went on about a 5 or 6 year run at that point. And I remember I have a stupid tattoo. You guys want to know something dumb? Is to get a sobriety date tattooed on you that you don't stick to. So this tattoo says 5/29/2015. I stopped using heroin, right? Because of her. She went to rehab, and I was like, I'm gonna get sober for the girl. And and you know what? It kind of worked, right? And my parents graciously allowed me to sleep on their couch and kick. I had my body was feeling awful. Has anybody ever seen the movie Apocalypse Now? So I'm laying on the couch withdrawing to war sounds, and these sounds that I'm hearing feels like what's going on inside of my body. And I'm 4, 5, 6 days into it, and I don't ever want to. I tell myself I am never gonna feel like that ever again. I have sworn away alcohol for good. I have sworn away drugs for good. And my parents were going to take my little sister up to college in Boise, Idaho, and I told them I'd love to go with them. It was Flagstaff that was the problem, not me. So I go up to Boise, Idaho, and I get about 7 days sober underneath my belt, and I tell my parents, you know what, maybe we could just have one drink at that Irish pub that we're out to eat at. And so I buy the first round, and then I buy the second round, and then I buy the third round, and then I buy maybe the fifth round, and we go back to the hotel room, and my whole family's getting into bed to go to sleep, and I decide to take 2 Trazodone and a Seroquel and go back out on town. And so I'm hitting the town. I help a random stranger change the tire on his car because altruism. And I'm good and drunk. And I wake up in Ada County Jail in Idaho with a drunken disorderly with a concealed carry firearm. And the thing I remember is I was wearing basketball shorts, and I put my waistband holster on the bar top because it was uncomfortable. And so when the cops got there, the only place that I knew where it was in this bar was a bathroom, because that's the only place I'd been. So I ran from these cops towards the bathroom. I fell down a flight of stairs, split my face open, and I briefly remember 6 cops standing around with me on their hood, just laughing their asses off at me. And so at least somebody got some humor out of it. And you know how it talks about that frothy emotional appeal? I am sitting in this jail cell cold as hell on the ground. They didn't even give me a boat. I'm wrapped in this, because I was a dope dealer, a 2XL tall tee, right? And I'm fucking freezing. Ada County was nice enough to allow me to get my wallet out of property and bail myself out. So I do that, and I make this phone call. I call my mom first. She doesn't answer. And my dad, he goes, what if this is Jesh in jail? And he goes, inmate from Ada County Jail, Joshua Boardman. And so I was sure that moment when my dad picked me up, that gave me those flashbacks of seeing him naked with a mag light pointed at him, that I would never fucking do this ever again, right? I had sworn it off entirely. And and that pitiful, incomprehensible demoralization shadowed over me. And it was a long ride back from Boise. And when I got back to town, I was like, I'm staying sober for sure. Boom, right back to it. I was selling dope in a couple of weeks, and off to the races again. So fast forward a bit, July 4th, 2018. Apparently I had a warrant out for my arrest, and God showed up, right? God showed up that day in the form of 2 blue outfits with a badge on the front. And so one thing turns to another, and I go into jail for quashing a warrant. And again, I'm like, I am never going through this ever again. And I get out of jail, and my house was a block away. I walk to my house, I get in the truck, and this strange mental blank spot has me arriving in a dope dealer's house in the square in Phoenix. And you know, when he's pounding on the bar top, like, how did this happen again? That was me. How did this fucking happen again? And all I knew how to do was go along with it, because I had been doing it for so long. I had not a defense against the first drink or drug. And so fast forward again a little bit, I checked myself in to this place called the Guidance Center, because my big brother and sister were in town, and they kept my brother would show up with his Harley running in my front yard and do pound on the door of my trap house and say, today's the day, and he would tell me that for like a month straight. Today's the day to go to rehab, today's the day. And I finally was like, fuck it, we're going to rehab. And I went initially for my family, and somewhere after those, you know, first week or so, I was going out for the cigarettes and the coffee, right? I was coming to the meetings for the cigarettes and the coffee. And I heard this speaker meeting on a Friday night at this place called Winter's Podium by this chick named Yvonne. And I don't know if you remember Yvonne, but I fucking related to this gutter junkie like me, right? This alcoholic gutter junkie. And I finally started to like hear this little message. And so I grabbed a sponsor. I started working the steps, and I didn't realize that the only thing you had to change when you got to Alcoholics Anonymous was everything. And so I didn't change everything. And so when I gained 40 pounds in 28 days in the Guidance Center, and I got back out on the streets, and I moved into my trap house. And so there was a little bit of a disconnect there. And so I got to this thing called the 4-step. It looked really hard. I don't know if it looked really hard. He outlined it super simply, and it looked really hard. And I immediately stopped meeting with David Harris, and bam, back to the fucking races I was. In the matter of 2 months, I was worse off than I was before. I had gone straight back, full throttle. I'm an alcoholic that goes 0 to 100 very rapidly. And so I turned myself into jail on my sobriety date, 12/17/2018. And I wake up from a blackout in F-Pod. They put me in F-Pod because I looked sick and fucking dying. I was 129 pounds. I was green, and I couldn't stand straight. And I started, I was court ordered for Exodus, right? And I started sending these kites off to Mike Vaughn. Court ordered for Exodus, court ordered for Exodus, court ordered for Exodus. I had to have sent 4. And then this guy was like, hey, dude, how about you just like lie? And I was like, all right, you know, my manipulation is coming through still to this day. My defects are showing even with the drink and the drug removed. And I'm writing this kite, and I write this kite, and it says, Mike, I don't want to die a using addict. And I sent this kite. And after I sent it, I realized that I fucking meant it. For some reason, I meant it. I didn't hear anything back from him. And so I go over to Trustee Pod, and he comes and visits me, and I fucking break down crying to this guy in the programs room. I didn't want to live the way I had been living, but I didn't have any tools to not live that way. And so I had no design for living that worked, obviously, with CCSO on my back. And he said, all right, I'll bring you over there. And so I'm in trustee pod, I'm pod porter in B pod. And the day I'm getting rolled over to Exodus, was a Friday. I remember it was mac and cheese day. They do dentistry where they yank teeth on Fridays because it's mac and cheese day and you can still eat, right? And I get to the dentist and they go, "There's our star patient. We're yanking 6 teeth today." And I'm like, "This is fucking awesome, right?" And I get back to trustee and they're like, "Jesh, roll up." And I'm like, "Okay." So I get over to Exodus and I'm carrying my tub, my mouth packed full of gauze, and I walk in there and there's this chick beating on this bowl. Plastic chairs and carpet, and everybody's sitting there with their eyes closed meditating, and I'm like, what did I get myself into? And so I just stand awkwardly in my cell they assigned me with my bucket waiting for them to stop meditating. And then everybody comes up and starts hugging me in jail and being nice and asking if I needed anything. And I'm like, this is fucking just wrong. And I don't know if any of you are familiar with the Exodus program. It's a 90-day program, and I'm a stubborn alcoholic. So it probably took 45 days for me to ask for any suggestions. And the first suggestion I got was to hit your knees morning and night and pray for the obsession to be removed. And I was so broken with so many failed relationships with humans and the outside world that I was willing to take the suggestion of somebody who maybe even seemed like they had some resemblance of manageability, right? And so I started doing that, and I don't know exactly when, but that obsession was removed. My next question was, what do I do about my court date? I had signed for 1.5 years in prison and 5 years IPS, and his suggestion was, give it over to God. And so one of the first honest times that I had given my will over to the care of a God that I wasn't sure I understood at the time was, God, tomorrow at sentencing, your will, not mine, be done. I get to court the next morning. My lawyer doesn't show up. He asked for a continuance, and I just got to go on a road trip for no reason. And my initial instinct was, let's go to prison. Let's get this over with. I'm fucking ready. I want to move on with my life. But God had other plans for me. I started to be that guy that at 7:50 was running around, turning off the TV, moving over the tables and setting up the chairs, because I found out at 8 p.m. every night I could share with other people who felt similarly to me. And this meeting that I met Rich in, he would come in and bring in meetings. And at the time he had some raggedy ass shoes. And he would walk his ass from the foundation house to bring a meeting into Exodus. And I remember him coming in fucking wet from some snow one day, and I wanted Rich's raggedy ass shoes. I wanted to be able to come in and bring the message to another sick and suffering alcoholic. And so I thought one day I might be there. God had some plans for me still. I stayed in Exodus for 115 days. Because I was afraid to leave where there was some resemblance of message, right? And God put me into reentry, and I get over to reentry, and my fears were true. There was no desire to stay sober, at least from a lot of the people. I remember blocking the door for some white boys so they could fucking sniff some pills on the table, and because I still wanted to be kind of a part of, I was letting those defects die hard. But I signed for a time served sentence, and that's what God was doing for me. I didn't deserve time served. I am so grateful that life isn't fair, and God showed up for me when I didn't deserve it. And that's the kind of God I have. He shows up and he's forgiving for me that even though that I messed up, I might get a second chance. And so I got time served. I had 2 days to the gate. I got fingerprinted for Arizona Department of Corrections at Coconino County Jail. And I hear clack, trap opens. And I go over to the trap, and Mike was like, I think you should go to the Foundation House. And the last thing I wanted to do was move out from living with 16 other dudes to live with 16 other dudes, right? But I took the fucking suggestion because, again, my decisions end me up in a blue jumpsuit. So I moved into this place called the Foundation House. I went to 180 meetings in 180 days. I got a sponsor. I started working the steps. I got a home group. I got a service commitment, and I fucking did the thing. I worked the steps with a sponsor, and I was sick and suffering, and I was dying. And it took me a while to meet up with this guy and give him my fifth step. And I met up with him. I gave him my fifth step, and then I couldn't meet with him again for a couple weeks. So I found a different sponsor. And this is when I really started to get the message. Jesse H was my sponsor at the time, and I would meet up with him and I would just get the fucking juice. I wasn't getting this through osmosis, right? I was reading the book with him and learning about my disease. And I started doing the steps and with this guy, and it was just it was that shift that I needed. And so I worked the steps, and like a good alcoholic, I got a relationship in the first year of sobriety. And when COVID hit, I was like, oh God, I could make her my higher power and I don't have to go to meetings, right? And so I did that. And I started to get this thing called restless, irritable, and discontent. And I was bitchy to work with. I was rude. I was short. My fuse was just that long, and I was just uncomfortable in my own skin. And I fired this sponsor because my girlfriend didn't fucking like him at the time. I let that happen for like 4 months. I didn't go to a meeting. I just sat there dry and angry. And I remembered something, that when I was going to meetings and I was working with another alcoholic, I didn't quite feel so dry and angry. So I went back to this meeting that was once my home group that dissipated at COVID, and I got a meeting place for it. We got it all set up. I got a sponsor. I started working the steps again. I started sponsoring a guy, and all of a sudden I'm moving through life normally. Right? I'm moving through life without the need for social lubrication, but acting kind of social. And life started to go good, right? And so since then, I sponsor more than 0 guys, and I meet up with my sponsor regularly. And I think I was talking about this at a meeting yesterday, and steps 1, 2, and 3, I've had to simplify it for some guys. And essentially, 1, I'm fucked. 2, maybe God can help. And 3, I think I'll fucking let him. I've worked with a few guys that aren't all there, and that seemed to work for breaking it down like that with them. And you know what? I'm pretty simple myself. So one, I'm fucked. Two, maybe God can help. Three, I think I'll let him. So making that decision, for me every day, number 3 is an action step. I have to wake up every morning and meet with God and be intentional about my time of my day, because if I don't, I start off my day askew. 4, nobody loves the leveling of the pride and the ego and writing it down on paper and sharing it with another alcoholic. But these are the types of secrets that keep me sick. And so I urge my guys to search through these steps like desperation of a drowning man. 6 and 7, I wasn't willing to give up my defects at the start. I wanted to pick and choose, like chicken and bones, you know, when you like take the meat off and you spit out the bones. Like I wanted to pick and choose which defects like I got to keep and got to get rid of, like and that's just not how it worked for me. I get to identify these defects and give them over to God and continue to show up, and faith without works is dead. So if I am not constantly meeting with another alcoholic, if I'm not of service, if I don't go to a meeting, my volume knob on my defects goes up. 8 and 9. So I get to write down this list of all the piggy banks I stole from those people's parents' houses that I talked about in high school. And I get to reach out and make amends to those. I had a very important amends that I got to make. I was selling dope out of my girlfriend's parents' house, and at the time, and I met him up for coffee, and it took me 4 years to get the courage to ask these people out for coffee. And I invited them out to coffee, and we sat down, and I have my amends that I wrote and like memorized, and and I'm just so fucking nervous, and like I tell them where I'm at, I tell them what I did, I asked them permission before, and I invited God in, which is strange, right? And I asked him if I had missed anything, and I hadn't missed anything. And then I asked them how I could make it right. And they told me the problem left when you did. And so I was the problem all along. Throughout my whole story, I was the problem all along. And unfortunately, I carry myself wherever I go with me. And now I'm blessed to live a life where I 10, 11, 12 every day. I meditate. I meet with God. I right my wrongs when I do them. I sponsor other guys, and you know, even in this last year, I was sitting at a job that I didn't fucking like, and I thought to myself, killing myself is a good option. And instead of doing something about how I felt, I was like, I could just kill myself. And I was doing the thing. I was meeting with guys. I was going to meetings. I was meeting with my sponsor. I was praying. I was meditating, but I still wanted to kill myself at work. I remembered that if I ask God for permission to make a move and he gives me the yes, I better go for it. So I ended up changing something in my life with the permission from God, which I never had done before. And now I transitioned into a job where I make less money and am much more happy. I go to meet with the guys in Exodus on Friday night, where half the time I leave with tears in my eyes because I am filled with gratitude from the message that I hear from guys with way less time than me. And I get to show up and get invited to things like this and show up for you guys and for myself. I love who I am today, and it reflects, right? I have a wonderful other half who is engaged to me, which is fucking nuts, and I have a healthy relationship with my family. I went back to visit my 93-year-old grandpa in Santa Maria that I hadn't seen for 12 years. And it was such an honor to be invited into a family setting instead of feeling like the black sheep. And today, I love myself. I love you guys. I'm grateful for this program, and I think I'll take another 24.